research and news. Today's episode is sponsored by Modern Machine Shop, Made in the USA podcast. I am Ramia Lloyd, and I'm here with...
I'm Elissa Davis.
Stephen LaMarca.
What's up? And I'm Benjamin. Hey, guys.
Hey!
How's everyone doing?
Doing well.
Fantastic.
Steve, I heard you got some technology gifts.
I did get some technology gifts. So, being a newlywed and also a new homeowner, of course, my beautiful wife got me for Christmas a power tool. She got me a Craftsman cordless battery-operated leaf blower.
Okay.
We don't have to blow leaves because we have an HOA that covers all of that.
So you
But
just go
the
to your
leaves
friend's
go
house.
into the garage sometimes, and she knows the garage is my baby. And I get really mad at the leaves, and it takes me way too longer than I'd care to admit, to sweep the leaves out of the garage.
Yep.
So, bless her heart, she got me a leaf blower. And she got me a Craftsman, because I think this is where your next question's going. What did you want to ask?
No, I was going to mention using a leaf blower to clean the garage is great, but also your garage is freakishly clean and immaculate. So I just want to point
very
that out.
clean
That
It's like a living room.
It's like really clean.
It's a living room with a really big door. And I have chairs in there because it's fun to hang out in there. And it's well lit. But no, she got me a Craftsman because many years ago, she asked her dad for a toolkit. She was like, I'm an adult. I want my own tools. I don't want to borrow tools from somebody else. I want to be responsible for my own things. And I want to hound people when they borrow my tools to make sure that they put them back. So she asked her dad for a toolkit one year. He put together an awesome tool bag. And it came with he also threw in a really nice cordless power drill. I say really nice. I'm sure there's a lot of people who will judge it because Craftsman hasn't had the best track record over the years, other than their accessibility and availability everywhere. But he got her a Craftsman power drill, and it takes Craftsman batteries. So she got me a Craftsman leaf blower to take the same batteries,
Yeah.
and so now we're building our Craftsman ecosystem and
Nice.
have many Craftsman batteries, and so much so that I even got a really sketchy upgrade adapter kit from Amazon. So to adapt,
Yeah.
I've since installed it on our Dyson vacuum cleaner, our cordless Dyson. Now it takes Craftsman power tool
that's
batteries.
fun. Yeah.
So no longer are we waiting, doing 15 minutes of vacuuming and then having to wait an hour for it to recharge. We just swap out those batteries and we're ready to vacuum. We're ready to suck.
That is the fun experience of when you buy one device that's wireless or battery powered. Now you're basically stuck in that entire ecosystem unless you want to switch batteries. Because I have some really old power equipment also, so it was like nickel versus LiPo.
Oh, NiCad versus
Right.
lithium ion versus lithium polymer.
My
Like,
equipment's
whatever,
so
man.
old that it was part of that previous technology, and I want to buy some new batteries because I was going old, but I don't want to buy older batteries. And I did something shady also, where it was like, this will kind of fit if you grind off a couple of edges, and but the contacts are the same. I'm like, these are batteries that could catch on fire. Your life is in line. We should have some better standards for this.
To set the record straight, I just have to do this real quick. Anything that stores energy does not want to be stored. If there's any form of storing energy, whether it's in a chemical form, like with gasoline, or electrical form, which is still chemical with batteries, there is a chance it can catch fire. Energy will always want to catch fire in somehow.
So because of that, all my RC car batteries, they're actually very big. I put them in a fireproof case in my garage.
Smart.
That's smart.
So
Smart.
I'm not that careful with my batteries.
Our batteries are in the den. We
Ours
should
is
probably move
mine's
them.
like in junk drawers.
Yeah, my
That's-
batteries mix
Do you
up. Such random.
everyone has that one kitchen drawer, right? That was
Yeah.
got everything.
Yes,
For
Okay,
sure.
okay.
Absolutely.
I have two of them technically because it didn't all fit in one drawer.
Yeah, it
So
grew.
I have another drawer that's got stuff like oven mitts and stuff in it,
Yeah,
but then it's also
yeah.
got random crap, and I had to put little containers in there.
When we moved into our house, the most important drawer we had to establish was the junk drawer.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was the first one that
That's where
where
you put all your
everybody knew where it
menus.
was.
The menus.
The menus.
Menus and,
Loose pens.
Yeah.
Duck sauce.
Instruction
Scissors.
manuals
Yes,
for
duck
air
sauce.
fryers.
Yeah.
4 pairs of scissors in there.
Yeah, it's you got a little bit of everything. But my first toolkit I got when I was 3 or 4 years old. I was really little, and it was one of those it's made for kids, but it still has like a saw in it and like a hammer, and it's like a legit toolkit. And my parents, I got it from my grandfather for Christmas, and I opened it and I was so excited. Before my parents like gave it to me, they took the saw out, and I had to ask permission to use it. And growing up, you know, we still eat in front of the TV a lot. Like that's
the thing.
It's you know, whatever. We don't eat at a formal dining room table. There's 7 of us. We won't all fit. So we would eat at like TV, you know, the little TV tray tables. And that was the only like wood thing that we had in the house. And so I would just take a hammer and nails and start nailing the legs of the TV tables. And at one point I got the saw and started sawing it, and then I was not allowed to have the saw anymore. But I think it taught me a lot of really important skills that I didn't realize until later in life, when I had to like hang stuff up, or I had to I was in wood shop, and you know, you have to use the saw for the first time. It's like I already knew these basic skills that some other kids hadn't had, because my first exposure to it was, you know, like 3 or 4 years old. Granted, I made things less structurally sound, but still, you know, it's the experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a good thing.
And I think there's so much value in understanding, one, the name of tools.
Yes.
Just not even if you use it correctly, but knowing how to use it correctly. And just the safety related, because once you know how to use it, then you know how to use it safely. So knowing the safety and just knowing the names of devices or tools gets you really, really far in life.
Yeah.
There are a lot of controls and adjustments you can make to just a power drill that absolutely change the result that you get.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, even with something as simple as like a socket wrench.
Yep.
Right.
Those things are down to like the very minute measurement, you know, because you put the wrong one in and it just slips right off, and it's like, great, awesome.
I think there's a meme page on Instagram. Well, there's definitely a meme page on Instagram that has like dad memes, and there's one that always has like, it's instinctual that when a guy picks up a stud finder, they have to put it on the chest. Found it.
Yeah. A lot of dad Home Depot jokes.
There's another one. Oh, there's another great video. This one's not just a meme, but it's a video of it's a pass fail thing.
Yep.
Like you hand somebody a power drill, what should be the first thing that they do?
Okay, but I do. Before we move on, I have a serious question.
Okay.
I have never used a stud finder before.
Yep.
Is there like, if I'm just hanging stuff up, like a picture or something?
You don't need it.
I don't need it. It's only for like mounting stuff, right?
Yeah,
like
if you're
mounting like a TV.
Yeah.
If you're mounting a TV, you want a stud finder, and you want a good one.
Okay.
If you need to
I
carry
usually
weight,
hire someone to do that.
Smart.
a lot of the picture hooks will have a weight recommendation.
Yeah.
If you go past that, then you should go into a stud.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
fine.
Because I've never had to use one so far, and I was like, should I have been using one when I'm like hanging up my heavy like posters that are framed and stuff? I'm like, but okay, that's good to know.
Ramia, can you tell us about today's sponsor?
Today's sponsor is Modern Machine Shop's Made in the USA podcast. Tune in for Modern Machine Shop's Made in the USA podcast to explore manufacturing issues faced by companies making an intentional choice to manufacture in the U.S. Featuring commentary from OEM leaders, Made in the USA blends its nearly century-long expertise with a unique audio storytelling experience to shine a spotlight on the past, present, and future of American manufacturing. Find Made in the USA podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms. Follow Modern Machine Shop on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks, Ramia.
Anytime.
Steve, one more thing.
Yes.
Now that you got some power tools, we're back in the office. We have a robotic arm that was waiting for you.
It was waiting for me, and Chloe and I last Friday had it installed.
Nice.
The robot is mounted on our workbench without improperly. This is not the way to do it, so don't do what I did. I did not ask my wife to borrow her power drill, and I brought the power drill into the office, and then Chloe and I did have the common courtesy to make sure to get a new drill bit from the hardware store and not tear up one of hers. Brought in the power drill. Asked Chloe to mark out on the workbench where we need to drill the holes. She did a great job. There were 6 red and green marks. 6 red marks, 6 green marks. Green being go, red being no go, just to measure things up, size things up. And then she found our automatic centering punch, which is an amazing tool. I think everybody should have. It's an underrated tool. You push it into something where you need a mark or a hole where you're about to start a hole, and it leaves a perfect little indent. That's like a non-erasable mark, number one, so it's great for marking things. But number two, it's also great to start holes when you're about to drill a hole. And we drilled holes, and Chloe and I learned a lot about the proper settings that a drill should be set to. So like the numbers behind the chuck on a power drill are your clutch settings. Didn't even know there was a clutch in a power drill. But I'm glad there is, because those numbers are great to prevent you from stripping the head of like a screw. So if you're using it to drive a screw in, set it to 1. You might need a little bit more than that, depending on how dense the material is that you're screwing into or you're drilling into. No, screwing. And that clutch is very important to prevent you from stripping things. But we were drilling something, so we learned pretty quickly that we had to set it to drill.
Right.
Number two, there's like a little number setting, a slider on top of most power drills. These are like standardized features, by the way. This is not unique to Craftsman. And that is, you got a clutch in a power drill. There's also a transmission in a power drill. The thing on top changes your gears.
Oh, yeah.
So if it's set to 1, it's a high torque application. And if it's set to 2, you need a high speed application. And everybody told us opposite when I looked it up how to do it. Like everybody says, oh, to drill through steel, you want high torque. But we got better holes when we set it to 2 and got that thing cooking a lot faster.
Yep.
It melted the steel, not literally, but like it went through there really easily. I also learned later that a hammer drill would have got us through there faster too.
Well, it depends. I mean, you don't need that much torque, and that's your ship size are small, so that's
so different from an impact wrench, which actually uses the hammers to apply more torque, and pulsed torque. As for a drill, is consistent, even torque. Impact wrench does pulsed torque. A hammer drill does your constant, gentle, like even torque application, but it has like a solenoid hammer in the back of it pushing it in. So if you ever are using a power drill and you're putting like a hand on the back to push it in, a hammer drill will do that for you. It's really cool. But the robot is mounted. We just need to plug it in now. I did plug in the e-stop button.
That's important.
Most important button on any machine tool is the e-stop button. And even though it doesn't have power, we can stop it.
Beautiful.
Is it like a big red button?
Nice.
Yes. It's the yes. And machine tools are like going like CNC mills and whatnot. Because of the younger workforce coming to work in the manufacturing industry, they're used to touchscreens. CNC controllers are starting to go touchscreen, but there's still one button, and it's a big red one. And so
That's
the
all you
e-stop
need.
is never going.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of trust in terms of like touchscreen versus physical devices. But we'll get into that in a different episode.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. Elissa, I'm traveling next week. I'm going to the A3 Business Forum and the AIM Committee. And tell me about how safe I'm going to be on a plane.
Well, that depends on quite a few things, namely what plane you're flying. I will say, so this is in reference to the Alaska Airlines flight that had its door ripped off about 5 minutes after takeoff. Or I'm sorry, about 20 minutes after takeoff.
Terrifying
it was 5
video.
miles in the air. Yes.
Frightening.
Those pilots, though, deserve a medal because they landed it safely. No one was harmed. Like it was also pure luck that no one was sitting in that exit seat row. Like that is the universe looking down and being like, all right, we're trying to tell you something. But so these were the 737 MAX, I think is what they were called. So these are new. This is like the newest edition of the 737. And this plane had less than 150 flights. It was like 142. I was reading a USA Today article about like the incident, and apparently there was a pressurization light, like a warning light that came on 3 separate times before this occurred. So in terms of like my background with this, so my grandfather, same one who gave me the tool set, he was an engineer for 40 years with Boeing. He was a lead engineer on the Boeing 757. He helped design the oxygen masks on airplanes. He helped design safety slides on airplanes. Like he worked there for a very long time. He was well respected. He loved his job. He would, I already told you guys talked to my mom about this, and she said he was a perfectionist. You know, he measured things down to 1/8 of an inch, and they were within 1/8 of an inch in terms of all of his measurements. They were perfect. So he would not send a plane up that was not perfect. So knowing that the 737 has all these issues, because now all the 737 Maxes are grounded.
Yep.
And United has been doing checks on them, and they found at least 9 planes have loose bolts in the doors, in the emergency
Holy
exit
cow.
doors. And just a little side note, the 757 was retired
Yep.
relatively recently in favor of the newer 737s. So my grandfather's plane they don't really fly. They don't make new ones anymore. In favor of the more cost efficient and fuel efficient 737, which are now having all these problems.
Yeah.
Also, you cannot find anything about 757 anywhere. I'm just going to say.
And there are a couple of key takeaways in the beginning portion of this, because I
There's
do
a lot of
remember,
takeaways.
one of the things I'm starting to see recently is Boeing, the CEO of Boeing, started making announcements about one, acknowledging the issue, but also looking at going forward and the transparency related to this issue, because this is affecting a lot of people.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting takeaways is the airlines found this issue. Obviously, Alaska and United started, and that's one of the mechanics. So aerospace. There's a lot of misconceptions about aerospace. Like, they're considered to be perfect,
Yeah.
which is not true. There's a lot of recalls. There's a lot of failures in aerospace. And one thing that helps aerospace is their ability to contain it. So understanding like what is a scale. So having United go through their entire fleet and say, do we have a problem, is part of general practices with the aerospace market. So it will definitely see over time what the scale is. But I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah,
we
going
move on.
back. So you say that this is potentially because due to cost cutting, like corners were cut.
That's what
and
I think.
Skips were stepped. Steps were skipped.
I think so. I think that maybe some sort of quality check was skipped. I think that they were like, we need to get these out because 737 has had many iterations. This is just the latest. And I think they wanted to get these out as fast as possible, and the quality fell by the wayside because of that. And, like and I told you guys,
Right.
my grandfather would have been the first to be like, whoa, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel that probably most engineers working on these planes probably feel the same way, that you can't be cutting corners, because the thing is about aerospace, is that, and about airplanes, is that the engineers, they design many fail safes to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And like the pressurization light,
Yes,
that's there
yeah,
for
that's
you to
something else I
check
wanna
it.
talk about.
Yep.
And so the fact that you're not checking it, that has more to do with that also has to do with like the airline being careless as
Right.
well,
Right.
because those fail safes are in place for you to be checking them and for you to be making sure that they're working.
And that is a good point. Like the resultant of the door coming off, or even the loose bolts, right? They found loose bolts. That is the culmination of like 10 different things to go wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So not only you have the design, the manufacturing, and they're producing a ton of these aircraft, right? So what happened in the whole process to figure out that, or to get to these loose bolts? And there's got to be multiple factors to get to that.
Right.
point.
Yeah.
The pressurization light I didn't know about. And I've got things to say about that because I feel like it's worth diving into. Could this have been a cultural thing? Because I don't know how many Ubers and Lyfts I've got in and I've seen on the dashboard.
check engine light.
Not the check well, the check engine light, that's a problem. but like seeing the maintenance light
yeah.
or the tire low light,
Yeah.
as all modern cars have TPMS, tire pressurization, tire pressure monitoring systems on them. And I've got beef with that, because there's a whole meme in the car community of when awful accidents happen, it's like that person's tire light was on. It's not actually true, but it's very hyperbolic. But that's the meme, and I don't want that. And I say it's cultural because people are just comfortable driving around with a low pressure light on their tires on, but that would insinuate that I'm speaking ill of the pilots. No, that's amazing that they
Yeah.
brought it down.
Yeah.
Brought that bird down safely, tens of thousands of feet up.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're just gonna pull over at a Cloud gas station and be like, "Let me know. We just gotta fill. We gotta check the pressure seals real quick." No, you're tens of thousands of feet up. That light probably came on. how far were they to from their destination?
They'd only been there for about, they were still right outside of Portland. They'd only been there for about 20 minutes. They were
Yeah.
about 5 miles above Portland when it happened, about 16,000
And
feet.
it's a big problem if a plane has to come back. Like the air carriers, I'm sure, like, no, you, under no circumstances will you turn it around and bring it back. It's
Yeah.
like, I've been on the ground for hours on end. Like if there's the slightest thing on, they just won't send it up.
Yeah.
But I guess this came on midair, and that's
But it came on midair 3 separate times.
3 times. Wow.
And tying this back to manufacturing, one thing that we've done. So actually, I was involved in a failure investigation when I was at my previous company. One of the test aircraft, like test aircraft 2 or 3, was doing I think a landing test, and it crashed and burned. It was for a business jet. So the root cause analysis investigation is super robust. I mean, I wouldn't say obviously nothing's error proof completely, but
Right.
the team that's going to be involved in working through this goes through every single document, every single process.
Yeah.
And that's where I think tying this back to manufacturing of, right, you give instructions to the operator, but were those actual operations completed? Obviously not if there's loose bolts, right? But the documentation, where we are in digital manufacturing, the traceability is very important in aerospace. And that's why it's so important of being, there was a problem on this one craft, one, understanding the scale of how many aircrafts did it, but then tying that back to, was it an operator issue? Was it a machine issue? Tying it back to a single scenario, and that's where we are today.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said, is just like, it's these 10 steps that happened that, like these 10 random things that happened that led to this thing happening.
Yeah.
And, like I was telling you guys, my papa always said my mom was terrified of flying growing up, which is hilarious because her dad made airplanes, but she hates heights. So he would always say to her he would try to make her feel better and be like, oh, well, don't worry. Most plane crashes are 90% human error. My mom's like, there's someone flying the plane, isn't there? That's a human, right? But I think it does come down to, like, that's the thing, is that yes, there was mechanical issues, but these humans are the ones who were either cutting corners or were not doing the proper checks or were not doing something correctly. So I think it's fair to put blame on Boeing to an extent, but I think it's there's a multitude of people who have to take responsibility in this issue.
Yep.
But I'm definitely disappointed in Boeing. My papa would have done better.
Pappy wouldn't have been happy.
No, he wouldn't have. He would have been really upset.
Can we transition to something a little different?
Yes.
So growth. We all been talking about how cool Australia's defense area has been.
Yep.
I think the U.S. has heard, and they want to spend a ton of money growing the industrial base. They just want to produce everything. So I found an article from it was a joint research between Additive Manufacturing Research Group and Velo. And it's interesting where they're looking at where defense is headed. And obviously we're seeing a lot of, with the new budgets coming out, tons of money being invested in defense, not only just sustaining or purchasing current equipment, but new equipment that they're designing also. And one thing related to Boeing's kind of journey, which you mentioned, the 757, is defense keeps their equipment for a really long time. It could sit on a shelf for 20 years before it gets used. So the life cycle of a lot of this equipment is very, very long. And that gets into kind of a bunch of scenarios where we're seeing additive adding a lot of value to the defense industry. And the research paper goes into what they're projecting, obviously, on the defense spending and how that trickles down into different technologies that are currently being used in defense and where they're projecting to see those use cases in different technologies. So they're talking about powder bed fusion, binder jet, and polymers versus metals. And they're definitely seeing a growth in just metal use cases. And a couple of scenarios that have come up. One is supply chain. One, timing of getting equipment, but also the availability of that equipment is becoming a current problem. So right now I see a lot of the research paper gets into a lot of use cases of let's solve some current problems now. But as we're designing new things, there's going to be a new set of features, new designs that are going to require additive. And it kind of balances the discussion of, okay, next 10, 15 years, we can't get a specific casting within a certain lead time because it's broken or the supplier's out of business. So they're using additive to support, casting replacements, which is fair. Also, not only for cast parts, but if they're unable to get certain parts where they can additively grow it and then machine it down, that's another scenario where it's physically impossible to get these machine components. And in the future, we're seeing talks about use cases of better fluid flow or more resiliency in some components. So it's a very interesting article, and it definitely talks about the problems that transfer from the defense industry to automotive to everything that we're seeing now of, I've got this really old thing, how do I replace these components?
Yeah.
So I thought it was very, very interesting, a research paper.
Well, it's interesting too because I know we've talked a lot about, like in the last couple months, about how much the Department of Defense and the different branches of the military are investing in additive manufacturing and advancing their technologies in that way. So, because I mean, I lived near the Air Force Academy, so obviously like NORAD and all that stuff, and they're always on the cutting edge of technology. So like when you told me like the Marine Corps and the Army, and I'm like, wait, not just the Air Force, So that's really interesting. And they're like they're looking to like recycle like the different. That'd be really cool.
Yep. And so that's not only on like the early design of trying to get new components into the stuff they're building, but also at the forward operating base, kind of the repair cycle too. So the whole ecosystem of I'm on an aircraft carrier, how do I replace components for a drone? Well, you got to get it from a ship from the West Coast, ship it over, or do you have a printer that you can print and then modify to support repairs that way? So we are seeing use cases like that. The Marines have been experimenting with that scenario too. So it raised a lot of interesting questions because the technology to support that, everyone talks about the physical asset to print something, the physical piece of equipment. But now how do you support the data architecture, the data to print something? So if I have a drone blade that needs replaced, I need the CAD model. Do I have the digital rights for that CAD model? Am I allowed to print it? Who's generating the revenue from that? So there's still a lot of, these questions were raised about 7 years ago when they started experimenting with this. And it hasn't been quite resolved yet, but it will get resolved at some point.
But the DoD's getting a new chance with new equipment and new technology. So like, before I get into that, I'll go back and say that I remember the first time going to a trade show and seeing some 3D printing company with a good booth position, like pretty close to the front of the show, and their 3D printer is a Connex. It's inside a Connex, and that's been adapted to be the enclosure of a machine tool.
A Connex is like a container.
A container it means like container for export.
Sure,
I think so.
It's a container like at the back of a tractor trailer.
It's something that you'd see in like a harbor for like shipping and
like
receiving.
A freight?
Yeah, freight container. That's what a Connex is. And it didn't. I just thought they were using it for like, it's a standardized piece of metal equipment that, can be used for anything, not just shipping and receiving. But then I realized, this is meant to be airdropped over a place where they want to build a fob, where the military wants to build a fob. But going back to the rights issue of like CAD models and stuff, I think the DoDs did something very smart with awarding the $500,000 grant, which doesn't seem like much, to Optimec, because Optimec is like the official 3D printer company that is certified and granted to repair F-35 titanium blisks.
Right.
So the titanium blisks, which are very expensive parts of the fighter jet, when they wear down, instead of replacing it and having to order a new blisk, Optimec's titanium metal 3D printer can repair it and then finish it to the spec that it needs to be, because it's a I believe it's direct energy deposition for titanium, and it's a hybrid machine, so it can finish it 5-axis finish the blisk too. So
that's fascinating.
It's good that they thought about this.
Yeah.
That makes me feel really good that the government thought ahead on something like this.
For once.
Definitely interesting because, we're preparing for FarmNext Chicago 2025.
Oh my God, I thought she was going to say World War III.
Whoa.
No. And, in that, obviously I work on the audience team, and we were talking to Dave Burns, because Dave Burns has been to every single FarmNext.
Yeah.
And he went to FarmNext before it was FarmNext. And so he was discussing like all like the great parts about FarmNext and about how it's like about community and how you see everyone from all the different parts of it. But he spent like 30 minutes just talking about how 3D printing goes from this one tiny little idea to how it becomes something. And that was fascinating. But he also specifically talked about how it can really improve like supply chain issues, because it helps with like nearshoring and reshoring, because everything will be available at your fingertips.
Yep.
if we can obviously advance the technology to where it needs to be. You don't have to be waiting that extra 6 months for that part to get there. You can just print it. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of complications with that, but it was a great conversation. He talked for like 40 minutes, but it was all very informative and super interesting.
Right.
He has a lot to say, and he says it by telling a great story.
Yes, and it was like and he was like, "I'm sorry, I talked for 40 minutes," and I was like, "No, please don't apologize. I learned so much. Like it taught me a lot because he's the foremost authority really in how that works." So,
and that's where, to add to your point, is like additive is kind of seen as the future, where that's partially true, but all the technology supporting additive is going to drag it along.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
The digital design that's required to get to getting the part quickly, right? But then the data coming off the machine and all the redundancies needed to reduce porosity or understand the thermal deflection as it's growing. So there's a lot of underlying technology. And then post-processing afterwards.
Right.
Let's not forget about that part of the additive. So there's a lot of stuff that 3D printing will drag along for the future.
Dave and I had a great conversation at Formnext because I was explaining to him how excited I was to see companies like Kennametal, Makino, Grob, like traditional conventional manufacturing companies, manufacturing technology builders at Formnext, an additive show. And I was like, look at this. Are we finally watching like the integration of additive in the rest of manufacturing? And he was like, well, don't celebrate too much. It's a good and bad thing.
Yeah.
Because it's good that, yes, you are seeing the integration finally of additive into the manufacturing industry. But it's sad in that, there are not as many specialized additive companies at Formnext anymore to make room for these traditional conventional manufacturing companies,
right?
Because they never pulled their heads out of their bums, and they thought they would replace all of the entire manufacturing industry.
Right.
They thought that, the future is 3D printing. We're going to 3D print all of the things like they do in Star Trek. Like, I'm going to get my hot cocoa. I'm a computer, hot cocoa. And then it's just going to materialize out of nowhere. And it's like, that will never happen. Anybody with 2 brain cells knows that will never happen. But what needs to happen is the integration. And because there are so many stubborn additive companies still, they're going to continue to go out of business. Hopefully, their worst case scenario is they'll get bought by a conventional manufacturer, but you're not going to see any like new additive companies become a new machine tool builder until they realize and openly accept that, okay, we need to play nice, and it's goes both ways. Like conventional manufacturing needs to play nice with additive too, which. Good job to Mazak and Okuma being some of the first to do that, and DMG. But yeah,
I love the idea that additive companies are gatekeeping additive manufacturing.
it's unbelievable. Like why would you? Yeah, but yeah,
That's just hilarious to me because I'm like, don't you want it to succeed? It's like it's like when movie stars get famous before you knew they were famous.
Do you want your everybody under you to have a future?
Guys, this was a great episode for 2024.
First one.
Woo. One in the can.
We should talk about our new studio in the next episode, or our revamped studio.
Yeah.
Or painted walls.
No more dungeon.
I mean, soon it will be a renovated studio.
Yes.
We're getting there.
We'll get there.
Step by step.
One episode at a time.
Yeah.
Ramia, where can they find more info about us?
antonline.org/resources. Like, share, subscribe.
Bye,
Bing
everyone.
bong.